Story 1. When you drive a sleeper berth rig, your truck isn't just a vehicle, it's your house. The cab is your cockpit, and the small bunk behind your seat is your bedroom, separated only by a heavy, light-blocking curtain. You learn to feel entirely safe in that tiny, enclosed pod. It's your sanctuary on the road. But 3 years ago, while running an overnight freight haul through the flat, empty farmlands of eastern Indiana, I found out just how fragile that sanctuary really is. It was just past 3 in the morning, and a massive thunderstorm had turned the highway into a black mirror. The wind was buffeting the trailer, pushing the rig side to side. I'd been driving for 9 hours straight, and the heavy, hypnotic rhythm of the highway lines was starting to make my eyelids heavy. I needed to pull over and take a federally mandated rest break, but the storm was getting worse, and the nearest official rest area was still 40 miles away. Then, up ahead in the gloom, I saw the dim, flickering neon sign of an old independent truck stop. It looked almost abandoned, but there were 2 other semis parked far back in the gravel lot, their lights completely dark. Relieved, I pulled off the highway and navigated my rig to the edge of the unlit property, parking right against the tree line. I kept my marker lights on but cut the main headlights, plunging the woods in front of me into pitch blackness. I was too exhausted to even check my phone. I unbuckled, crawled into the back sleeper berth, and pulled the heavy privacy curtain completely shut. I locked it into its plastic snaps, sealing myself into total darkness, wrapped in my blanket, listening to the rain violently drumming against the outer shell of the cab. I fell asleep within minutes. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up suddenly. My heart was pounding, but the cab was completely quiet except for the fading storm. The heavy rain had slowed to a light, sporadic drizzle. I lay perfectly still, staring into the pitch black of the bunk, wondering what had jolted me awake. Then the truck shifted. It was a tiny, subtle movement, the distinct, heavy dip of the cabin's suspension shocks, exactly like someone had just stepped onto the outer running board of the driver's side door. My breath hitched. I held my chest still, listening intently. I told myself it was just a strong gust of wind from the passing storm, but then I heard it. A faint, metallic click from the front of the cab. It was the unmistakable sound of the driver's side door latch releasing. I knew for a fact I had locked it. But these older fleet trucks had worn-out lock cylinders, and a simple Slim Jim or a shaved key could pop them in seconds. The door clicked shut again. Someone was inside the truck. I was trapped in the sleeper berth. There are no exit doors in the back bunk. Your only way out is to crawl forward between the seats into the main cab. I reached out in the dark, my hand trembling violently as I felt around the mattress for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers brushed against a heavy steel tire pressure gauge. I gripped it tightly, pressing my back against the rear wall of the sleeper. Through the microscopic gap where the privacy curtain met the interior wall, I watched a faint silhouette move. A man had stepped into the space between the driver and passenger seats. He was standing completely still, just inches away from me, separated only by a thin layer of fabric. He didn't rustle through my dashboard looking for a wallet. He didn't touch the keys in the ignition. He just stood there in the dead silence, breathing heavily. He was listening to see if I was awake. I squeezed the steel gauge so hard my knuckles went numb, praying he would just take what he wanted and leave. But then, I saw his silhouette raise a hand. His fingers pressed against the outside of the privacy curtain, slowly feeling the shape of the fabric, searching for the plastic snaps to pull it open. I didn't wait for him to open it. With a burst of pure adrenaline, I screamed at the top of my lungs and violently kicked the center of the curtain with both feet. My boots connected hard with something solid, a face or a chest. The man let out a sharp, breathless grunt and stumbled backward forcefully. I ripped the curtain open, swinging the heavy steel gauge blindly into the dark front cab. My high beam suddenly flashed on. He had smashed into the steering column as he fell backward. In the blinding glare of the dashboard lights, I caught a split-second look at him. He was a tall, skeletal man with completely bloodshot eyes and a jagged scar running across his chin. He wasn't wearing shoes, and his clothes were soaked with rain and mud. He didn't try to fight. He scrambled frantically over the passenger seat, threw the door open, and tumbled out onto the gravel lot, sprinting straight into the dark tree line. I locked both doors, jumped into the driver's seat, and cranked the engine. tearing out of that gravel lot so fast my tires screeched. I didn't stop until I found a well-lit state police station 20 miles down the road. The troopers went back to investigate the abandoned lot. They never found the man, but they found an old stolen pickup truck hidden deep in the trees behind where I had parked. Inside the bed of that truck were dozens of driver's licenses, wallets, and cell phones belonging to missing long-haul truckers. The police think he'd been targeting isolated drivers sleeping in their rigs for months. To this day, I don't care how tired I am or what the weather looks like. I never park near the woodline of an unverified lot. And before I close that privacy curtain, I wedge a heavy steel cargo bar directly between the two cabin doors, because I know exactly how easy it is for the dark to step inside. Story number 2. I've been driving over the road hauls for about 6 years now. If you do this job long enough, you get used to the silence. Most nights, it's just you, a couple 100 miles of empty asphalt, and whatever thoughts you're trying to avoid. You learn to appreciate the monotony. But about a year ago, on a late-night run through a rural stretch of western Pennsylvania, I learned that sometimes the empty space fills itself with things you never want to encounter. It was around 2 in the morning. I was hauling a heavy load of construction materials down Route 9, a 2-lane highway flanked by dense, unbroken woods on both sides. There hadn't been another car on the road for at least 40 miles. My headlights were cutting through a thick layer of ground fog, and a heavy freezing rain had just started to tap against my windshield. I was exhausted, counting down the miles to the next truck stop so I could finally pull over and sleep. That's when my GPS gave a sudden, sharp chime. The screen flashed red, indicating the main highway ahead was completely closed due to an accident. It immediately recalculated and directed me to take the very next right turn, a narrow, unlit county road that snaked deep into the timberline. I hated taking detours at night, especially in a rig as heavy as mine, but I didn't want to sit stranded on Route 9 for hours. So I slowed down and swung the cab onto the old asphalt. The moment I turned, the road degraded instantly. It was barely wide enough for my truck, and the overhanging tree branches scraped aggressively against the top of my trailer. The fog got thicker here, rolling off the hillsides like smoke. I crawled along at maybe 20 miles an hour, straining my eyes against the dark. After about 10 minutes of winding deeper into the woods, I saw a faint amber glow up ahead. As I got closer, I realized it was a massive, old-fashioned yellow school bus. It was parked completely sideways across the entire road, blocking both lanes. Its hazard lights were slowly blinking, casting long, rhythmic shadows into the trees. I stopped the semi about 30 feet back. My high beams lit up the side of the bus. It looked ancient. The yellow paint was rusted and peeling, and the windows were completely blacked out with what looked like dark garbage bags taped to the inside. My first thought was that a local school district bus had broken down turning around. But then it hit me. It was past 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. Why would a school bus be out here? I blew my air horn, a loud echoing blast that shattered the silence of the woods. Nothing happened. No one got out. No lights changed. The bus just sat there, dead in the road, hazards blinking. Against my better judgment, I decided to pull my air brake and step out onto the metal runner of my cab to get a better look. The freezing rain hit my face, shocking me completely awake. I grabbed a heavy metal maglite flashlight from the side pocket of my door and shone the beam toward the front windshield of the bus. The driver's seat was empty, but as I swept the flashlight beam down the rows of blacked-out side windows, my stomach completely dropped. The garbage bags covering the windows didn't cover the very top corners, and in those tiny uncovered triangles of glass, I could see faces. Dozens of them. They weren't children. They looked like grown men and women, completely motionless, pressing their foreheads and noses flat against the glass, staring directly down at my truck. They weren't calling for help. They weren't moving. They were just watching. Panic hit me like a physical wave. My survival instincts screamed at me to get back inside, throw the truck in reverse, and get back to the main highway. I turned around to step back into my cab, and that's when I froze. Standing right in the middle of the road, directly behind my trailer, was a man. I have no idea where he came from or how he approached so quietly. He was tall, wearing a thick, dirty canvas jacket, and he was holding a heavy chain with a massive iron hook on the end. He was staring right at me, slowly wrapping the chain around his forearm. And then I heard the metallic clunk from the front. I whipped my head back around. The folding doors of the school bus had swung wide open. The people inside weren't passengers. They began spilling out of the bus door in a frantic, chaotic rush. They didn't look like a normal crowd. They were moving with a bizarre, aggressive speed, their eyes reflecting the glare of my headlights. 2 of them were carrying what looked like tire irons, and another had a long wooden beam. They were sprinting straight for my cab. I didn't think. I scrambled back into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and locked it just as the first person reached the side mirror. A heavy object slammed against my driver's side window, cracking the outer layer of glass with a loud crack. I threw the transmission into reverse and stomped on the gas pedal. The semi roared, tires spinning on the wet asphalt before catching grip. The trailer swung wildly as I backed up the narrow road at a terrifying speed, smashing through overhanging branches. In the headlights, I watched the crowd chase the truck for a few seconds before retreating back toward the bus. But when I checked my rear-view camera to guide my backup, the man with the chain was gone. He had vanished into the woods. I backed up for nearly half a mile before I finally found a clearing wide enough to swing the cab around. I drove back to Route 9, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it felt like it was going to burst. When I finally reached the main highway, I found out the accident my GPS flagged didn't exist. The road was completely clear. I drove straight to the nearest state police barracks and told them everything. They took my statement, looked at the spiderweb crack on my window, and sent a couple of cruisers out to check the county road. An hour later, the trooper came back into the waiting room. He told me they found the old road, but the bus was gone. The only thing they found were deep tire tracks in the mud, a discarded roll of black garbage bags, and a heavy iron hook lying in the grass. The police never found out who those people were or how they managed to hijack my GPS signal to route me down that road. To this day, I never trust an unexpected detour. If the main road is blocked, I pull over at a well-lit rest stop, lock my doors, and wait for sunrise. Because I know exactly what's waiting out there in the dark, waiting for the next truck to slow down.